direction. The one thing that I will say before we go on this adventure of emotional resiliency or emotional regulation is that grief is one of those exceptions to all of the rules. Grief is sort of outside of the norm. It's messy, it's extremely distracted, it's crying, shaking, hating, crashing, chaotic, wanting waves of heightened sensitivity, and there's absolutely nothing graceful about grief. Grief is unbearable pain and suffering, and you might be crying one minute, laughing, forgetful, angry. I mean, grief is just all over the place. And so during grief, our emotions are very raw, and we could be our worst selves. And I don't actually think that we can control grief. So when you're grieving, let's do like the caveman did, and let's stay in the cave and yell and throw rocks and set fires and sleep. And I don't think the goal when we're grieving is emotional regulation. So that's my start before we begin, because I think grief is just its own being. So I want to start out by saying we are not depressed. Everybody thinks they're depressed right now. Everybody that I talk to, they're like, I think I'm depressed. I'm like, you're not depressed. Your brain is down regulating. And there's actually some real science that backs up this concept of down regulating. And I want to share it with you. So the brain is a predicting machine. It is top-down predictive coding. And so a key function of the brain is to use the past to predict the future. And so the brain predicts what it's going to see before it sees it. And it predicts patterns, it sets up expectations, it does a feedback loop of errors. And these errors are taken by the system really seriously, because if I make a prediction that I'm going to go to a watering hole and get some water, but when I get there, there's like a saber-toothed tiger that's ready to eat me, my predictive error could cost me my life. So when we engage in the world, we're predicting that the world is going to be as we think it's going to be. But right now, there is nothing predictable about what life is going to look like. We can't look at the last year and say, oh, this is what this year is going to look like. We've had so many errors. And so the brain is automatically down-regulating us. And so we are down-regulated. So everybody who I've talked to, they're like, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. I'm like, you're not depressed, you're down-regulating. And so what that means is we don't feel like ourselves. We kind of feel shut down. We might feel numb. Some people are saying I have foggy brain. So I just want to normalize for you the idea that we're not all depressed. Like, we do not have a whole society of clinically depressed people, but we're just down regulating. I also want to bring into the mix a theory that was created by Bernard Bars, and he created a theory called the global workspace theory. And basically his concept is that our brain works like a spotlight on the stage, and the spotlight focuses on one thing. It can't focus on 12 things, it just focuses on one. And so when the emotional brain is overactivated, it's like a spotlight on our emotions. Our emotions take center stage. Our emotions take over, and we're triggered. And so unfortunately, when the spotlight is on emotions, the cognitive brain, the thinking part of our brain, is in the dark, and it's not working. It's not even on. So when the emotional brain is flooding, we're wearing our emotional glasses. And basically we start on this road. Well, now that I think about it, I've always been unhappy. Well, I can't even imagine a time that I was happy. Well, yeah, life is pretty terrible. Well, it's always been terrible. Well, I'm pretty scared. Yeah, this is pretty miserable. Like, we put on these emotion glasses, and that's all we can see. This frontal lobe is like in the dark. And so as a result of the spotlight only focusing on one thing, the cognitive brain is kind of offline. And so when we're upset, we're not thinking. So we have had a lot of trauma and grief over the last year. And I'm sure that you can kind of think about people who you may be talking to, and it's like their brain isn't on, like logic isn't working. And that is because the brain is designed to focus on one thing at a time. So we need to be very self-compassionate before we go into this dialogue about emotions. The more worked up you are, the more sensitive you are, and then the more that you can't focus, and then the more things are going to annoy you. So when you notice that you're upset, this is not the time that we figure out like quantum theory. Like the first thing we need to do is offer ourselves some self-compassion. And I would say in general, we are very kind to others. We extend that to others, but we often are very mean to ourselves. So I want to set the stage by saying that. So let's figure out, what are emotions? What are we even talking about? Emotions are information. That's all they are. And I know for some people, emotions are scary. We work in academia. A lot of people stay up here in their head like a big bubble brain, like a giant hot air balloon of brain. But below that hot air balloon, there's like this body that's feeling all of these things. So if for some reason we can't feel our emotions, it's because we're processing the world in our minds and not in our bodies. And I get it. It's been kind of a scary time to feel all of this grief and pain and worry. And so it's easier to kind of stay up here in the head. But, you know, eventually we're going to have to feel it. So emotions can also be described as energy. And in this talk today, we are going to talk about emotions being energy. And if emotions are energy, then they can't be destroyed, but we can move them. So you can't just like, some people are really mean. They're like, stop freaking out, or I need to snap out of this, or I need to blah. Well, you can't really do that. So you can't really just stop an emotion, but we can move it. And we're going to learn how to do that today. So for purposes of today, we are going to define information and energy as what emotions are. It's information for you and it's energy. And this emotion has a connection to our body. That's how we're going to define it today. And here's what I'll say. It is exhausting to control energy. It is exhausting to control emotions. So I talked to a friend this weekend, and after I hung up, I was extremely tired. And I thought, well, that's weird. All I was doing was talking on the phone. But upon reflection, I realized that partway through the conversation, I wasn't being heard. And so I contracted and I kind of shut down in the conversation. And how often does this happen at work? It happens every day. Like I read emails, you know, in the morning, and I just contract. I just like shut down because I'm like, oh man. So, I mean, again, think about how often we contract. So let's get out of this like good, bad feeling of emotion. Let's kind of talk about what our body is doing. Do we shut down or do we open up? And I realized that when I was talking to this friend, I wasn't expressing myself. I was kind of shut down. I was kind of hiding. And so as a result, I was tired because it's very exhausting to control your energy. And so I want you to be a detective this week. I want you to notice when you experience a big emotion, do you feel open or do you feel closed? And so this could be happening in your brain, this could be happening in your body, but it's like kind of a sense that you feel like I'm closing up or I'm opening up. And so what does open feel like for you? And if you can't think about it, think about babies or puppies or love. Like, what does your body do when you think about those things? Hopefully you expand and you feel more open in your head and your heart. So just take a few seconds and feel like those emotions of love and joy, and hopefully it feels like an opening. But then what does your body feel like when we're closed and we're shut down? And we've all had that experience at work, unfortunately. And especially right now in this moment that we're living in, there's people that are not being their best selves, right? And they might not mean to be mean, but sometimes they are. So what does that feel like when we're all closed and shut down? And I know this is a different way of thinking about emotions, but I'd much rather us be in this space of kind of, does this open me or does this shut me down? And I think that's a really productive way. So basically, we generally dislike negative emotions. We kind of hate them. We're okay with like joy and excitement, but we really hate like anger, jealousy, rage, fear, depression. We are just like, Jenny, I don't want to talk about emotions. I don't want to go there. I don't want to deal with it. And so instead of maybe labeling that good, bad, positive, negative, I really want us to think about the idea, like, is this experience of reading this email, is this experience of being on the Zoom call, is this expanding me or is this contracting me? And that's how I kind of want you to think about emotions. And I think that way we can tolerate discomfort a little bit more. I think when we put a word to it, like anger, we're like, that's such a, a trigger word. So being unaware of emotions is extremely unhelpful. In fact, it's harmful. So what you are not aware of, that runs your life, whether you know it or not. And what you hide controls you. So we've got to kind of bring this out. And so when you're upset, it is important that you don't just blow it off and you say, whatever, I'll get over it. I'm fine. I'll just get over it. We want to do the exact opposite. We want to take it out and we want to look at it. Now, I promise I'm not one of those touchy-feely therapists. So we're going to get some tools that are going to kind of help you figure out how we can do this in a real way. All right. So I'm also going to say we weren't really taught this. So if you're like, Jenny, I don't even know the first thing about how to go about feeling my emotions or feeling my feelings. It's okay. We weren't taught. We have learned that certain emotions are just not okay. And society says all the wrong things, right? They say, pull it together, stop being so emotional. You look weak. Go into your room until you calm down. Stop crying. My family used to say, I'll give you something to cry about, right? So you know, we get told the exact wrong things about emotions. And so we didn't really learn. And so we often judge and criticize ourselves for having emotions or for feeling strongly about something. And especially in academia, vulnerability and weakness is absolutely terrifying. I mean, like, heaven forbid I put my heart out there and I say what I'm thinking, I'm going to get squished. So I also think that toxic masculinity really plays into this repression and blunting of our emotions. So we're kind of in the perfect storm of we have all these emotions, but we don't really know how to work with them or how to deal with them. So let's talk about basic tools. Let's talk about the basics. If you go to any therapist, if you open any book, if you look at any theory, this is what they'll tell you. And this is like the beginner, this is the beginner section, right? So at the very beginning, they tell you, become curious about what's happening. Like, oh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Oh, I'm feeling hot. I'm feeling dizzy. I'm feeling upset. So the first thing is just to become curious. What is going on? And then once we notice what's happening, then we can name it. Okay, I think this is anger. I think I'm fearful. I don't know why, but I feel afraid. And then we're going to become compassionate. We're going to be like, okay, it's all right. And we're going to accept it. All right, I'm sad right now. I'm just going to accept I'm sad. And then therapists give you like 10 other things to do. Once we name it, once we sort of accept it, then they say, you know, ask questions, use distraction, move into a creative action. So you flip sides of the brain, do breathing exercises or do movement, kind of stop the flood. So this is like, you know, this is like you're going to therapy 101. So see, I saved you time and money. So if you're having a big emotion, this is what they'll tell you every single time. Be curious, name it, accept it, and then shift somehow out of it. But because I'm Jenny and I'm not going to go with the basic tools, we're going to learn 4 other ones that I like. Okay. So this is my very favorite one. I have been using this since January 6th nonstop. It's been totally helping me. This is my very favorite one. And basically you have to write. You have to take a little moment of time and write things down. You do not have to use, you know, paper. You can use a computer or a laptop or whatever you've got. You can use, you know, a little iPad or whatever. But basically when you're overwhelmed, you stop and you write down what is happening. That's the first thing. So I'm going to use myself. On January 6th, I got a little overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie. I was really kind of freaking out. I was like losing my biscuits. So you take a few seconds, you write it down. You're like, okay, I am very fearful right now. And then you go backwards. And so once you've kind of written down what's going on, then you go backwards and you say, what am I telling myself that is feeding this fear? And so I was writing, I'm afraid we're going to turn into Mad Max in the Thunderdome. And I don't want to live in Mad Max in the Thunderdome. And I don't want armed marauders walking through my neighborhoods, you know, trying to steal water out of my house. And so I was writing all of this, you know, my real kind of fear, right? And so what I want you to know about this is that the emotion is second. It's coming after the story. And so if something's intense and you're having a big emotion, like let's say a meeting didn't go well and you're really worked up, take a moment and write down what the feeling is that's coming up and then go backward and write down the story that you're telling yourself that's feeding this emotion. and read it. Sit there and read it. And I read my Mad Max and the Thunderdome concept, and it made me feel a lot better, because I was like, okay, what's the truth about this? Is it really going to turn into Mad Max and the Thunderdome? Probably not. You probably shouldn't go to the Capitol today, but there are probably not going to be armed people at your door asking for water. So it helped me to kind of calm down. My fear subsided, and I kind of felt a little bit better. So I just want to tell you, I'm giving you tools that I've actually used, and I really love this one. It's basically like name the feeling and then go backward and write the story. And that to me is a really good trick. So if your emotions are coming second, what are they saying? What are they saying about you? So if it's anger, what is it that you care about? Anger is like, I care deeply. I care so much, I'm angry. Some people say that anger is deep grief. Some people say that anger is a secondary emotion. It's actually a mask for helplessness or hopelessness. So some people think anger is not even real. It's not really a real first emotion, that you feel helpless and you don't like feeling that, so you get angry. Disappointment is another variation of that. I care about this and I'm disappointed that it didn't go my way. Guilt and shame is always self-anger or self-judgment. We're beating ourselves up. What is going on? Tell the story. Anxiety is worrying about the past or the future. Sadness can be frustration. It doesn't always have to be depression. It could be I'm frustrated and I don't have a voice. And then depression can absolutely look like anger. People aren't necessarily all crawled up in a ball on their bed. Depression can absolutely be anger. So that is my favorite tool. My favorite tool is to identify the emotion and then go backward. This is my second favorite tool. Those of you who have kind of followed me, you know I like this one. I've been using this a lot this summer. My students are really digging it. So let's see if you will like it. So what you do is, again, you identify what's going on. And if you don't know, it's okay. Pick whatever you feel like. If you're like, I don't know whether this is anger or fear, or just pick whatever it feels right. So you pick the thing that you're feeling. Let's say I am angry. And you say it a couple times, like, I am angry. I am angry. I am angry. And then you switch it a little bit. You give yourself a little bit of a distance. You are not angry. You just feel angry. So you put in the word feel. So now you walk around and 4 or 5 times you're like, I feel anger. I feel anger. This is giving you a little bit of a separation. You are not anger. You're just feeling it. So it's giving you a little bit of a space. Say that 4 or 5 times. And then you substitute the feeling for energy, because we just learned that feelings are energy. Emotions are energy. So then you go from I feel anger to I feel energy. And boy, I like that one. That makes me really bouncy. Like, I'm like, I feel energy. I feel energy. And so that makes me really happy. I might put on some music and dance around. So that one makes me feel really happy. I might do that 4 or 5 times. And then if I want even more separation, you just kind of end it with I feel, which is a truth. You know, we all feel. And when I say that 4th one, it makes me quieter. I kind of can feel the difference between I am angry to I feel. Like all of a sudden I'm like calmer and in my body. So please try this one. Let me know how you like it. My students have really enjoyed this one, but I really like it. I think it's an act of separation, so that we can kind of move out of that swamping, flooding feeling that doesn't help us. Okay, and then this is another new one. I've been trying this with some students. I've really liked this one too. So when you have a big stressful feeling or a big emotion, you can't really stop it. It doesn't really work that way. It's like walking out in front of a train, right? You cannot jump out in front of a moving train. So when you're having a big emotion, it's not helpful to be like snap out of it, because it doesn't work that way. But what you can do is you can run another thought, another train, another track right next to that one. So if you've got this big emotion going on, let's say it's painful, it's a fear or it's a sadness, it's going like, brr. Okay, fine, feel that feeling and then jump over here and create a whole new track. You now have a second track, a second train. And this second track and this second train is running right next to the big emotion. And this second track and this second train is joy. It's the thing you want to feel. So take a few seconds and write down your desired feelings. I want to feel happy. I want to feel love. I want to feel joy. I want to feel bouncy. So write down your want of what you would like to feel instead, and then narrow it down to maybe like the top 3. And then figure out experiences that'll help you to feel that way. So I always want to feel like awe. Like that's my favorite way to feel, like AWE, like awe. And so if I was doing this exercise and I was having a hard day, I would sit down and I would say, I want to experience awe. And then I would say, what are some activities that I can do to help me feel awe? And I would say, well, gosh, going to an art museum just like puts me there, right? Like I just snap out of my funky way and I just feel awe instantly when I'm standing in front of all of that art. But I can't go to an art museum right now. So what am I going to do? So I sit down and I actually get online and I go to like the Chicago Art Institute and I browse around on the website and I go to the gift shop and I make myself some coffee and I feel like I'm just kind of there walking around the Chicago Art Institute. So again, sit down and just give yourself a couple experiences that will kind of put you into that feeling. So then you have the terrible feeling that's going on, right? The thing that you're kind of swamped with, but you also have this second track that's going on at exactly the same time. And what happens is it kind of neutralizes. So you have 2 tracks going and it kind of squishes them into one and you just kind of feel a little bit better. Okay, and then for some of you, I don't know if you will love this or not. I have no idea. Some people absolutely love this. There is a technique called EFT or tapping, and I'm not going to teach it to you because we don't have time today, but I do have this YouTube clip for you, and I'm going to give these slides to you so that you can play around with these slides. But EFT is really magical for some people. They really like it. You don't have to see a therapist. You don't need any equipment. You don't have to pay any money. There's a billion YouTube clips on how to do EFT. There are tons of Pinterest downloads of how to do EFT. There are tons and tons of resources out there. And this guy, Dawson Church, he's kind of like the big guy on tapping. And this is an 8-minute clip that just takes you through. And basically you tap on certain parts of your body. And it's when you're feeling a strong emotion, you do a little tapping on parts of your body and then it calms you down. Now, for some people, this is amazing. They love it. And for some people, it's like, it didn't work. But, we'll try it. Anything to kind of soothe you right at this point in the game. All right, so here's some cautions. You do not want to confuse your emotions with who you are. You are not your emotion. You are just having information coming out, right? You're experiencing energy. You are not anger. So that's the first thing. Your mind is often a storyteller. It tells you stories and sometimes it lies, like mine did on January 6th when it was telling me that we were going to go into Mad Max and the Thunderdome. So your emotions can't possibly be facts if your emotions come second after a story. If your brain's telling you a story, then your emotions can't be facts. It's just an experience that you're having. I will caution you that grief can move very quickly into rage. And grief sometimes feels like a wildfire that is completely out of control with no barriers. And so if you are in a grief moment right now, you've lost a loved one, you've lost a relationship, there's a lot of loss going on right now. If you're in grief, it's hard to kind of control it. So I don't know that I would even try. The other thing is that I would say we're really mean to ourselves and we have very unrealistic expectations for ourselves. We often say snap out of it, but you just can't. And then I would say if you are triggered often, you may need to look at some trauma stuff. You may need, like if you're triggered every day, all the time, all day, we may need to talk and I can help you come up with some ideas about how you might go to try to find a trauma person. And then we all have emotional exhaustion right now. I'm going to say it, even if you think you aren't emotionally exhausted, you are, because we need peace. This has been kind of a rough year. We have battle fatigue. And so this emotional exhaustion that we're all kind of feeling, that emotional down regulation that we talked about at the beginning of this talk, this is due to collective trauma that we have accumulated over the past year. So I just want to normalize that for you. That's nothing to fix. It's just true. We are kind of emotionally exhausted. So I wish you peace. And I think that the noise level right now in the world is very, very loud, like everywhere. It's noisy. I mean, I had leaf blowers blowing and there's social media. And it's just impossible to hear ourselves right now. And so I want you to just take time and listen to what's happening to you. You cannot stay in your head forever. It's not healthy. It's not good. It won't, you're going to crash. So, I mean, I know it's safe up here in the head bubble, but we have to feel at some point. And so feelings are basically just an indicator that you're telling a scary story. So if you listen to your feeling and then you go backward and you kind of say, what's the scary story I'm telling myself? You can kind of shift out of it. And so that's my wish for you. My wish for you is peace. And so I'm going to stop.